Okay, so because of wrong teachings, in the last half of the first century CE, that means from around maybe 75 CE, images of Buddha first appeared in Gandhara. In Gandhara, a place in India, Buddha statues were first created. So you look here, it's about 500 years after the Buddha passed away. The Buddha said that original Buddhism will last for 500 years. So when people practice original Buddhism, they understand the Buddha's teachings, that we have to help ourselves. The Buddha said, no man can bless another. The Buddha said, our good actions will bless us, our evil actions will curse us. So karma is very important. So because people did not understand the Buddha's teachings, Buddha's statues started to appear 500 years after the Buddha passed away. People pray to Buddha statues and ask for help. And then in the 2nd century CE, there was a king called Kanishka. He came into power. And his empire extended from Afghanistan to Central Asia over a vast piece of land. And then he liked Mahayana Buddhism. And under him, Mahayana Buddhism developed. And he convened the 4th Sangha Council. The 4th Sangha Council, where they compiled the Mahayana books together and put them down in writing. When these Chinese monks like Xuan Zhang and Pasian and all that, they came to India, they found that Mahayana Buddhism was flourishing side by side with this Hinayana Buddhism. And they also reported that actually Hinayana Buddhism was more popular than Mahayana Buddhism. There were more monks, more monasteries which were Hinayana. And then as time went on, by the time of I Ching, which was around 670, the differences between Hinayana Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism was less and less. And the two traditions began to blend together. How is that? For example, like nowadays, even some Theravada monks believe in the Bodhisattva path. Right? The Mahayana books talk about 6 paramis or 6 paramitas. Our Theravada books talk about 10 paramis. In other words, our Theravada books also accept the Bodhisattva path. But originally, Bodhisattva path was not the Buddha's teaching. But Theravada, these Hinayana monks, they started to accept. So that's why the differences became less and less. And then later, the esoteric Buddhism, secret school became popular and influenced the Hinayana Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism. They started also to practice more mantras and all these things. Then the true Buddhism started to disappear. Now we come to this esoteric Buddhism, secret school. This secret school, why do they call it secret school? Because some of the teachings were very different from what the Buddha taught. For example, when this monk called Nagarjuna, who is called Long Su Pusa in Chinese, when he started to write the Mahayana books, and he brought out these Mahayana sutras, people asked him, this he has mentioned in his biography, he said people asked him, why is it before there were no such Mahayana sutras? Now you claim these are the words of the Buddha. You know what he said? He said the Buddha hid these books in the ocean, and he went down to the dragon palace and he brought up these books which were hidden by the Buddha. This we cannot accept for various reasons. Firstly, these Mahayana books always talk about Mahayana and Hinayana, Tai Seng, Kasyo Seng. But during the Buddha's time, there was no Tai Seng, Syo Seng. The Sangha was one. That's the most important thing. Secondly, during the Buddha's time, there were no books. Nobody made books. So how could the Buddha have hidden away books? Thirdly, the Buddha said that his teachings are open for all to see. The true Dhamma is open for all to see. And the Buddha said, if anything is secretive, then it is deviant. If it's secretive, then means you have something to hide, right? That's why you find in the secret school, they have secret teachings, for example, like mantras. Mantras came from Brahmanism, Hinduism. And these mantras are very powerful words. And these powerful words, they are so powerful. I like to say in Hokkien, Chô Gọng Thảo Si Yong Chiu La, Ke Gọng Thảo Si Yong Chiu La. To do black magic, they use mantras. To counter the black magic, they also use other mantras. To keep spirits, what we call Kui Kia, to control the Kui Kia, the spirits, they also use mantras. And then on top of that, they have, for example, what is called Tantric Buddhism. Tantric Buddhism comes from Tantra Yoga, things like the Kama Sutra, where they talk about the teacher can make love to the disciple, to have sex, and they say this can lead to enlightenment. But the Buddha says that when we have sensual pleasures, it is impossible not to be attached to it. So the Buddha says sensual desires are an obstruction in the holy life. But these people, because they don't understand the Dhamma, then they teach all these things. And other things like they do a lot of rituals. And also in the secret school, they, like what is practiced in Tibetan Buddhism or Lamaism, they go into a trance. They go into a trance, just like in this what do you call it now? Maosan, the school of Taoism, which is corrupt. So all these things you find in the secret school. So according to this Professor Hirakawa, that he says one of the most influential theories in East Asia divided Buddhist history into three periods: the true Dhamma, the counterfeit Dhamma, and the end of the Dhamma. So, true Dhamma, counterfeit Dhamma, and end of the Dhamma. True Dhamma is the first 500 years period after the Buddha passed away. That is the true Dhamma. And then the counterfeit Dhamma is when Hinayana Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism started. This period is called the counterfeit Dhamma. From about 50 BCE up to 700 CE. So that means about 500 years after the Buddha's passing away, until about 1,200 years after the Buddha's passing away. So this counterfeit Dhamma, instead of relying on the Buddha's words in the suttas and the Vinaya, they are more interested in new Mahayana sutras and also in the Abhidhamma, Jataka tales, and commentaries and Visuddhimagga and all these later books which the Buddha says actually are the words of disciples, not his words. And then the end of the Dhamma is the time when the secret school started, esoteric Buddhism. That is about 700 up to 1100 CE. That means the last 300 or 400 years of Buddhism in India. It's called the end of the Dhamma because at that time they were not practicing the Dhamma anymore. They are more interested in rituals, rituals like mantras, this tantric Buddhism, and going to trance and keeping spirits and all these things. That is not Dhamma at all. That's why even though the name Buddhism still continued, but that is the end of the Dhamma. No more Dhamma. They are not really interested in the Dhamma anymore. So here I like to summarize what is the difference between Hinayana Buddhism and original Buddhism. Is that in Hinayana Buddhism they are interested in the later books like the Abhidhamma, commentaries, etc., which is not the Buddha's words, although they acknowledge that the original words of the Buddha are found in the suttas and the Vinaya. Then secondly, what's the difference between Mahayana Buddhism and original Buddhism? Is that they reject the original suttas and they follow the Mahayana sutras. The original sutras are called Hinayana books by the Mahayana. And in the Bodhisattva precepts, there is one precept where they are encouraged not to read the Hinayana books, the original discourses of the Buddha, and instead to propagate the Mahayana sutras. And they talk about paramis and the Bodhisattva path and all that. But actually, in the suttas, we find the Buddha said that he looked into the past 91 world cycles. That means one night the Buddha did not sleep. The whole night he was looking into the past for 91 world cycles, which is an extremely long time. The Buddha said he only saw 6 Sammasambuddhas, 6 Buddhas who are willing to teach the Dhamma to the world. In other words, there are 99.99% of the Buddhas are Pacheka Buddhas, Buddhas who do not want to teach. That's why in the Isigili Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha said at one time outside Rajagaha there were 500 Pacheka Buddhas. So you see, at any one time you can find a lot of Pacheka Buddhas, but they all don't want to teach the Dhamma. That is the real fact. Now these Jataka stories on which the paramis are based, if you look into them, they are too childish to be true. Jataka stories where animals can talk, where animals can behave more superior to human beings, and all this. And lastly, I'd just like to say that the Chinese version of the suttas, the Pali suttas, now left with them are called the Agama Sutras. And these Agama Sutras, when we compare them with the Pali Suttas, we find that they are very much deficient. For example, our Digha Nikaya, the Pali Digha Nikaya, the equivalent is called the Chang Ahan Jing. The Digha Nikaya has 34 suttas. In the Chang Ahan Jing, they have 30 suttas. In our Majjhima Nikaya, we have 152 suttas. They have 221, slightly more. In our Sangyutta Nikaya, we have 2,872 suttas. They have 1,362, which is less than half. In the Anguttara Nikaya, we have 2,198 suttas. They have only 471 suttas, only about a quarter. Also, you find the Chang Ahan Jing, the long discourses, come from the Dhammavuddho school. The Chung Ahan Jing come from the Savasti Vadin school. The Cha Ahan Jing comes from the Savasti Vadin school. The Chungi Ahan Jing comes from they don't know where, an undetermined school. Why is this? Because they look down on these Hinayana, what they call the Hinayana Suttas. So they neglected these suttas, and over the centuries they lost these suttas. So after they lost these suttas, they tried to recover the suttas, and they only recovered part of it. So the suttas and the agamas are not as complete as our Theravada Pali suttas. This is mentioned by this historian that our Pali suttas are complete from the time of Emperor Asoka up to now. It's complete, we didn't lose our suttas, So our Theravada Nikayas are very complete. Now because the suttas are not complete, some of the things they say in the agamas are different from our Pali suttas. For example, our Pali suttas talk about 10 sangyojana, 10 fetters. They only have 5 fetters. And in our suttas we talk about liberation by mind and liberation by wisdom. But in our suttas, liberation by mind means liberation by mind as well as liberation by wisdom. But for them, they only have liberation by wisdom. And they say there's no such thing as the formless realm, whereas we have the formless realm. Also, in the Chinese version of the history of Indian Buddhism, they have a lot of stories. In Chinese Buddhism, there are a lot of stories. So, for example, they say that the Emperor Asoka tried to kill some monks who did not follow the orthodox school. He sent them off in a boat, and they got somebody to make holes in the boat, so that when the boat went halfway, the boat sank. And according to the stories, some of the Arahants helped the other monks to safety. This we find is impossible. You find the history of Asoka, he's so compassionate, he will not even want to kill animals. How can he kill human beings? And on top of that, monks, how dare he kill monks? So a lot of these stories in Mahayana Buddhism, we cannot believe. They even say that Ananda's preceptor was Mahakassapa. Just because Mahakassapa was very famous, they say Ananda's preceptor was Mahakassapa. But in our Vinaya books, Ananda's preceptor was a monk called Belaka Sisa. And even this Professor Hirakawa, he does not believe that Ananda's preceptor was Mahakassapa. Because in the suttas and the Vinaya books, we find Mahakassapa and Ananda, many times they were not in agreement. So I will end the talk by saying that we have to remember this sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya 4.180, where the Buddha said that in future, if any monk says that such and such are the Buddha's words, we should compare it with his original suttas and the Vinaya. Only if it follows the original suttas and the Vinaya can you take them to be the Buddha's teachings. Otherwise, reject them. And the last thing I'd like to say is to notice that originally Theravada school followed only the suttas and the Vinaya, original suttas and the Vinaya. But nowadays, our Theravada school, we are already corrupted. We follow the Hinayana teachings. We follow, on top of the suttas and the Vinaya, we follow the Abhidhamma, we follow the commentaries, we follow the Visuddhimagga, we follow later books like the Pittakopadesa, and all that. So what is being practiced nowadays is not really Theravada Buddhism, but Hinayana Buddhism. So we should practice the original teachings of the Buddha, which is actually Theravada Buddhism. I end for here. Yes, but this is only a minor difference, not so. And I'm not very clear why this is so. I read it somewhere, but I didn't keep it in my mind, so I can't tell you of it.
I was not taught to human beings by the Buddha, but they say the Buddha actually taught the Abhidhamma to the Devas. So if everyone can clarify this.
Okay, this is found in the I'm not sure it's Abhidhamma books or written by Buddha Gosa later. That when the Buddha spoke the Abhidhamma in heaven, 800 million devas became arahants. And this only shows ignorance of the suttas. If we look into the suttas, you find the Buddha said that arahants are only found in the human world. Only humans can become arahants. Only humans can. Because you see, devas and devis, they have a very good life up there. They are not willing to struggle. We only make effort in the spiritual path when we see dukkha. So like nowadays, the world is quite materialistic, quite good. Everybody is enjoying life. Who wants to become a monk or a nun? Nobody wants to become a monk. Right? Only when you suffer, then only you think you want to become a monk or a nun. That's why the Buddha says in the suttas, I forgot exactly which sutta, but it is mentioned that arahants are only found in the human plane. A lot of people don't know that anagamins do not become arahants. Anagamins, they have done practically all their work already. So they are reborn in the fourth jhana plane in the Suddhavasa heavens. From there, they pass away and enter Nibbana. They don't attain arahanthood, From there, they just enter Nibbana when they pass away. For devas and devis, they can become sotapanna. It is mentioned in the suttas that sometimes when the Dhamma is spoken, these devas and devis, they like to come and listen, And when they listen and they understand the Dhamma, they attain stream entry. Okay? It says that intention is karma. Intention is very important. What is your intention? So if your intention is to help people, but you help them in the wrong way, you don't create bad karma because your intention is not bad. But then, because you are bodo, then they continue to be bodo.